Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle, the show that brings y'all the libertarian perspective on the burning issues of the day. And I'm joined, as I am every week, by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, the BB&T Distinguished Professor of Ethics and Free Enterprise Leadership at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. Richard, good to see you again.
Good to be with you, and coming off a great high of the wonderful conference on American non-interventionist foreign policy that we had right here in Charleston on Sunday, April 29th. It was a wonderful program, a great turnout, great speakers. And I think people had a good time and felt that they had learned and bolstered their understanding of the dangers of government overreaching, particularly in these foreign affair areas.
Yeah, I thought it was a great talk. When I say it was good to see you again, well, I just saw you on Sunday and Saturday as well in this beautiful city of Charleston, South Carolina, where you live and where you teach there at the Citadel. And the weather was absolutely unbelievable, and it was marvelous. I got in there on Saturday about noon, and it was nice to be able to walk around Charleston, and what a beautiful place. And yeah, the conference I just thought was just first class. Everything went great. And by the way, we videotaped it. We'll be putting the talks online. But it just went great. We started out with a welcome by Dan McAdams from the Ron Paul Institute and myself. And then we had a special guest. He wasn't really an official part of the program, and that was Congressman Mark Sanford. But gosh, Richard, I thought he gave an excellent presentation on foreign policy. He's a conservative, but I thought it was really, really well done.
Yes.
And then we went into the talks with Ron Paul first, and boy, Ron gave his usual fantastic talk, and then that was followed by a great talk by you, and you covered some things that I thought we ought to talk about today. And then Dan McAdams went, and then I went, and then we had a panel discussion, and I just thought it went great, and everybody seemed to be really happy with it. And some people didn't show, but we had a sold-out crowd beforehand, and
yes.
Yeah, it was. I thought it went fantastic.
Yes, close to 300 people had registered for the event, and a large majority of them actually showed up and pretty much stayed through the entire afternoon program. So I think it went very well. It bodes well to believe that there are so many people interested in and wanting to get more information about these dangers from American foreign interventionism and the alternative of a peaceful, non-interventionist American foreign policy.
Yeah, I really think, Richard, it's a sign of the times. That, as I mentioned in my talk down there, the Pew Foundation did a poll that reflected that 70% of the American people now believe that it's time for the U.S. government to mind its own business, to stop serving as the policeman of the world. And that's a phenomenal statistic. And they said they took the poll a few years ago, and that it actually has been increasing. It was like 60-something%, and it's gone up to 70. And so we very well may be reaching this critical mass. I mean, when you and I were first, starting FFF, you were Vice President of Academic Affairs 29 years ago. I was the president and founder of FFF. This was the idea that people would oppose interventionism was like unheard of. And you and I edited this book, which I still think is a timeless, fantastic book. We gave free copies to everyone there at the conference, The Failure of America's Foreign Wars.
Yes.
And look at what's happened over the last 29 years. I mean, 70% of people. Now, they may not take the pure non-interventionist stand, but that's a pretty phenomenal statement that it's time for the U.S. to mind its own business. Now, you brought up a very interesting point in your talk that I thought we ought to focus on a little bit, and that is that this mindset of interventionism that applies to foreign affairs, where the government feels the need or the desire to intervene in the affairs of other countries. You made the interesting point that mindset of interventionism doesn't apply just overseas, that actually it undergirds the whole welfare state, regulatory state mentality here domestically. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? I think that's a critically important point.
Well, I think that the general underlying premise, or sort of a outlook, is the mentality of the social engineer. It is the belief by some that they know how people should live, how people should interact, how they should earn a living, what their beliefs, attitudes, and values should be, and that if you believe that people should not be left alone to go about their peaceful and voluntary lives and interactions with others, because you don't like the outcomes, or you don't like certain things about how people interact with each other, as well as the outcomes, then that immediately leads you to the idea that it is you are going to take the duty, the responsibility, assert the right, if you will, to set the world right. That is, how should people earn a living? How should they interact and associate with each other? How should income be redistributed? What values and beliefs should individuals have about themselves and about the society as a whole? And domestically, we see this everywhere. The government presumes to know at what wage we should be able to earn a living on a job. The government presumes to be able to zone and codify construction, housing, the infrastructure of the road system, in the wider sense, redistribution of wealth, government taking your honestly earned money and then redistributing it through various contemporary welfare programs, or to be confining you to, because they take your money, how you can plan your own retirement, or what health care and medical insurance you will have, and so on, an entire litany of this. This is all the mentality of the social engineer. If I can use an analogy that was first developed by Adam Smith in the 1700s, not in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, but in his earlier book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And there's a famous passage in it in which he talks about the man of system. And the man of system is what we call the social engineer, the government planner and regulator, who looks upon what Smith says the great chessboard of society. And he believes how the pawns on this great chessboard of society should be situated and arranged with all the other pieces on that board. Now, of course, the pawns on that great chessboard of society are each of us as individual human beings. And rather than allowing us to determine, to use that metaphor of a great chessboard, allowing us to decide, well, where on the chessboard do we want to situate ourselves? What places and relationships do we want to have with those around us on that great chessboard of society? The man of system, the social engineer, believes that he knows what the pattern should be like, what the relationships and interactions should be, what the outcomes should be. And therefore, rather than allowing us to spontaneously determine the patterns of human relationships on the great chessboard of society, he wants to impose one from the top down. And of course, that inevitably creates conflicts and contradictions and corruptions, when what the hand of the man of system is attempting to do and moving us about is different how we ourselves want to position ourselves on that board. And that creates the tensions, the conflicts, the corruptions of the society. And we see this inevitably. This is what goes under the name of crony capitalism, is it not? The people who want to use the state to determine where their position, the wealth and income they have, the market share they have as a business, or the social engineer working with certain of the pawns to be able to manipulate and con the arrangement of the patterns on the great board of society. Now, what applies domestically in that way, Jacob, is no less in international affairs, which was the core theme of this program we did on Sunday, this past Sunday, on foreign policy. And that is, the government is the great social engineer, the central planner of human affairs. The United States government, especially since the end of the Second World War, has arrogantly presumed that it is the duty and the responsibility of the political leaders, the elite, the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., to set the world right, not just to redistribute wealth and income at home, not just to regulate industry or determine where zoning and infrastructure will be, or what words we can use and how we can associate with each other here in the United States, but the world. what governments people should have, how they should live, how they should earn a living, what values and beliefs they should have. And so what forms and manifestations has this take most recently? Well, just think of Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia. All of these are instances in which the United States has decided we think those governments are bad. Bad for both the people in those countries and the region in which that country is sitting in some part of the world. And we therefore are setting ourselves the responsibility, that is the president and the Congress and the military establishment that follows the orders of the president, as well as the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security, and they're now going to enter a country, as they did with Iraq especially, and overthrow, admittedly, a dictator, a brutal dictator. I could tell stories of Iraqis I met during the era of Saddam Hussein and horrendous things that they told me happened either to themselves or to their family members. We're not talking about a Mr. Pussycat here, but the presumption is that the United States will arrogantly pick and choose arbitrarily which country it deems a threat, either to the region or to their own people or to the world, and will proceed to invade the country, overthrow the government, and expect that after 2 weeks, everyone will just walk around with a little American flag and say, hallelujah, thank you, Washington, D.C. You're going to transform our society into a model of an American community, with the forgetting that this is thousands of miles away, involving a country with its own history, its own culture, its own traditions, its own religions, its own customs of how to do things. And then when we try to impose this, and we give them, quote, democracy, and then they hold an election, we are shocked that the outcome is not the one that we said would be good on that great chessboard of society. They practice policies of excluding women or discriminating against other sects and groups within the Muslim faith because of these divisions that have been going on for hundreds of years among these people. Now, the outsider might say, why would you treat women in this way? Why have you not developed tolerance among different variations on the Muslim faith? The same way in the West, we developed tolerance and respect for different variations on the Christian faith. But the fact is, they don't, and they're going to resent and be resistant and revolt against someone from the outside telling them how to live and how to manage their own affairs and to interact with each other. And it results to disaster, corruption, violence, a blowback of sometimes terrorist actions against the United States itself. The same way, domestically, without the same degree of actual violence, there are numerous unintended consequences of negative and destructive forms from domestic government regulation and intervention. It's all the result of the mentality, and the policies of both the national and then the global social engineer, the central planner, who wants to design either your own society or design the societies of others. Both lead to their own unintended, disastrous consequences that mean less freedom, both sometimes for those people in another part of the world. And we've seen that destroying Saddam Hussein and so on created a shaky environment that opened the door for what? Islamic State. These group of theological totalitarians who brutally were killing people, slaughtering people, enslaving people, just killing people because of the unintended consequence of destroying the structures, and the demons rose out of that rubble. The same thing happens at home, where you perpetuate poverty. You create unintended consequences of unemployment. You slow down growth and improvement. You narrow the people's civil and personal liberties through government intervention when practiced at home. These are all the similar consequences from the core premise that those in government believe they know how to manage and direct and reorder the society rather than leaving people free and having government pursue its reasonable things to see that people don't do the following. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Is that not fraud and deceit? If the government is limited to those things and allows people to develop the character and the quality and the experience to then peacefully go about their own lives of self-responsibility and tolerance and respect for others in their peaceful and voluntary relationships, then whatever occurs in the patterns on the great chessboard of society is the best that can be hoped for free people in a free society, and admittedly always a bit of an imperfect world. But that is far superior than the central planner coming down and presuming and arrogantly saying, I know how the world shall be managed, both at home and abroad.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the Libertarian Nobel Prize winning economist Friedrich Hayek, who talked about the mindset of the central planner. He said that there is this fatal conceit where the central planner thinks that he knows what is best, this conceit that I know what's better for you than you do. Yes. And you mentioned the welfare state. I think this is a classic example of this fatal conceit. Now, as Hayek pointed out, the opposite to the central planner is the spontaneous order, where people are deciding for themselves how to pursue happiness in their own way. They're living their own lives. They're planning their own affairs. This is what Hayek calls the spontaneous order, where everybody's planning his own life rather than having a government official centrally plan from Washington or even the state government the person's life. And I think the classic example is what you point out in terms of the welfare state, that if you have a society with no income taxation, let us say, and that was American society, as I pointed out in my talk down in Charleston, that for more than 100 years, 100 and some odd years, Americans were free to keep everything they earned. There was no IRS, there was no income tax. This is what defined an American. This is what defined America, along with a lot of other things, but this is one of the principal things, that everybody was free to keep everything they earned, and they decided what to do with it, whether to share it with the poor, whether to save it, invest it, consume it, hoard it, even destroy it. That people were free to make that decision on their own, and it's impossible to overstate the unusual nature of that society. I mean, even today it's shocking, especially it's shocking for Americans who have been born and raised under a system where government can essentially set the percentage anywhere it wants as to the amount of income that the government's going to seize. I mean, sometimes they're nice and they make it 25%. Other times they're not so nice and they make it 50, 60%. But nobody should be under any misconceptions here. The government is deciding the percentage. Well, that's not the way it was under the American system for more than 100 years. Government wasn't setting any percentage because there was no income tax. Government didn't have the authority to seize people's income. Well, in that case, Richard, people are going to decide whether to provide for their own retirement, save for their retirement, help their parents if they're in need or not. They get to choose, handle their own health care decisions, and so everybody's deciding this on their own. Well, I think the point you make is very telling here, that this mindset of the central planner, the fatal conceit that comes into existence in the early part of the 1900s is, look, we can't let people make these decisions. They're going to be irresponsible. They're not going to care for their parents. We need to establish a mandatory Social Security program that forces young people to help the elderly because they're not going to do it on their own. Or we need Medicare and Medicaid because Americans are just too irresponsible to handle their own health care decisions. And that's the mindset of the planner. He cannot tolerate the decisions that come out of the spontaneous order. He must direct, control, and mandate. And remember, behind all of this is violence, the threat of violence. If you don't pay your taxes, if you say, I don't want to participate in your Social Security scheme, I don't want to participate in your foreign wars, I'm not going to fund you, I'm not going to pay my taxes this year, the IRS will come after you with everything it has. It will garnish your bank accounts, it will seize your assets, it will put liens on your home, and in the extreme case, they will prosecute you. They'll put you in jail. And if any moment you use force to resist them, in other words, you get your gun, you say, you're not taking my home, even though you've foreclosed your lien and transferred ownership to another person, or you're not going to take me to jail, they'll kill you. I mean, the minute you raise your gun against a government official, they're going to fire. And so there's always that implicit threat of violence. We don't see it because most people just go to jail or they have their assets taken. But now if you transfer it to the foreign arena, here's where they're free to use the violence with impunity. And that was really the mindset of Iraq. I mean, they had failed to get rid of Saddam Hussein with the brutal sanctions that had taken place throughout the 90s. They kept thinking that the more they kill the Iraqi children, that Saddam Hussein would finally say, okay, I can't stand these children dying, I will abdicate. Or they were hoping for a military coup. It never happened. So after 9/11, they knew that the environment was one of great fear. They seized on that. They brought up the whole WMD nonsense. But it was really just a way to do what they had wanted to do with the sanctions, and that was get rid of Saddam. But you see, it's that mindset again that, oh, we know what's best for the Iraqi people. We need to put in a pro-U.S. dictator. And this notion, Richard, that, oh, that they just want to help people in foreign lands is nonsense. They're supporting the dictator in Egypt. I mean, that's a military dictatorship in Egypt today. And they're over there providing armaments to fortify its existence because it's pro-U.S. And so there's that mindset again that we know what's best for all these foreign countries. We know what's best for the United States as to which dictators we want to retain in power or install in power. And unfortunately, the people in these foreign lands feel the brunt of that violence, massive violence with troops invading and bombs dropping and homes, businesses, infrastructure destroyed, and then with the perverse outcome, of course, with the rise of ISIS and the massive refugee crisis that their interventions in Libya and Syria and elsewhere have produced. It's just a catastrophe, both here at home in terms of the destruction of our economic liberty and the destruction of lives, property, infrastructure, and overseas lands.
Yeah, the almost sort of like the case study for the twinness of this social engineering mentality, that is the interventionist mindset at home and abroad, was in fact Lyndon Johnson's Great Society period. Because here we saw the belief and the practice of attempting to impose, based upon the earlier New Deal legislation of FDR, and Lyndon Johnson served in the Congress during part of FDR's time. He viewed himself as a protege of FDR, and then he comes into power after Kennedy's death, and then is reelected himself, and he implements the Great Society programs, the war on poverty, the war on illiteracy, the war on discrimination, the war on. The idea of the U.S. government, through regulation and tax dollars, redesigning the domestic terrain of the country to fit a model of the progressive or the leftists or the modern American liberals' perception of the good society. But what is Lyndon Johnson doing simultaneously, with virtually simultaneously in lockstep with the implementation of these Great Society programs to socially engineer the transformation of America at home? He is sending what ends up being, at one time, over 500,000 soldiers. At the height of the Vietnam War, there was approximately 500,000 soldiers. Of course, there were rotations and replacements, but on the ground, 500,000 U.S. soldiers in South Vietnam. And what was the purpose there? To remake that country, to redesign them, to hold back what they viewed as evil forces. The consequence is that tens of thousands of Americans literally lost their lives, the vast majority of them having been conscripted. This wasn't even a volunteer army like it has been in Afghanistan or Iraq, at least. At least they didn't force you to fight and possibly die, as well as compel you to be put in a situation of having to take another person's life violently. But in Vietnam, there was military conscription, the draft. So people were sent over there, put in harm's way to potentially kill others or die themselves under the compulsion of the state, where you either ran away to a place like Canada or were thrown in jail at home and had that on your record forever after, in terms of hopefully a life career in employment and improvement of your own life. So as a consequence of it, they were trying to remake that part of the world with disastrous physical consequences. It's estimated that possibly over 1 million Vietnamese died during the Vietnam War, thanks to Lyndon Johnson and his whiz kids like Robert McNamara and so on, and Dean Rusk, to remake Southeast Asia, to stop the dominoes from falling. While at all the time, they're introducing these programs that destroy the inner city African-American families and related families, slow down economic growth and progress, Economists such as Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams have in immense detail and over again told the story of how minority communities were making progress, even under the old segregation laws and the bad discriminatory and racial attitudes, were making improvements in the 1950s and early 60s. And how once these great society programs are introduced with the intention to remake society, improve the conditions of various people, it slowed down the net improvement of the wealth and welfare positions of African Americans in the U.S. and other minority groups. It closed opportunities. It intensified racial animosities. It created the situation in which we saw those race riots going on tragically and terribly in inner cities in 1967 and 1968. What was the parallel going on? Bombs dropping in Vietnam, demonstrations on the street against an unpopular war, a degree of resistance to a war not seen since the American Civil War, literally 100 years earlier, with anti-draft riots in New York in 1863 and so on. So the result is that it's the same mentality, and the caricature, the template of it, of recent times, is the great society of trying to fight wars against X, Y, and Z at home while trying to remake an entire part of the world 10,000 miles away from American shores. This mentality is dangerous at home, and it is disastrous when instituted at abroad. And as you said, Jacob, the difference between domestic intervention and foreign intervention, at least at one level, one dimension of it, is that, yes, they'll arrest you and throw you in jail if you don't pay your taxes, or they'll fine you if you hire someone for less than the minimum wage. Of course, that all has the threat, as you were saying, the power to kill if you resist. But normally they try to avoid that. But on foreign shores, they treat the rest of the population of the world as if there are no human rights. They talk about human rights, but they'll use drones to supposedly target accused terrorists in places like Yemen, which has nothing to do with the United States, and they'll create deaths of, quote, collateral damage, innocent bystanders. They've certainly done this in Iraq, in Syria, and Afghanistan, because while they talk about human rights and human dignity and freedom, once they're outside the jurisdiction of the territory of the United States itself, the rest of the world has no human rights. They are just people who are potentially subject to the violence of America as the U.S. government pursues its purposes. Dare I say, in some instances, the actions undertaken in these various settings would, by an objective standard, be considered war crimes. The same way the U.S. points its finger at war criminals like Saddam Hussein, or they talk about Assad in Syria. Is it not the same when your drone attacks or actual on-the-ground attacks cause the deaths and injury and destruction of the property and lives of thousands of innocent bystanders in the name of pursuing your social engineering goals in another part of the world? These are all the dangers that they're one and the same. Domestic intervention and foreign intervention are merely two elements of the same premise.
Well, consider the assassination program, the drone assassination program. I mean, every person that they're assassinating has never attacked the United States. I mean, they've never initiated any kind of violence against the United States. Instead, the military central planner or the intelligence central planner here in the United States has simply decided these people should not be alive. They've made the decision that these people are evil. And, you know, the so-called war on terrorism, it's really just a figure of speech. Terrorism is a criminal offense, and these people, regardless of what they're doing in other lands, have not committed any criminal offense against the United States. But the central planner here at his little computer where he's got his little drone thing, he just says, zap that guy, because we, the central planner over here, have decided that he is evil. That's the classic fatal conceit, and it's extreme case of central planning. That we're not going to plan your affairs over here. We're just going to eliminate the people that we think are unsavory people and don't deserve to be alive. There's another factor of this, Richard. Whenever they're reconstructing these lands, where they're rebuilding this ideal society, they inevitably build it modeled after their national security state here in the United States. And as I said in my talk in Charleston, a national security state is a type of governmental apparatus that is the opposite of a constitutionally limited republic. So it's interesting. The first thing they do when they destroy these regimes like in Iraq or Afghanistan, first thing they do is they establish the military. Massive military establishment, just like here, and then a secret agency that has the power of assassination and so forth, like the CIA, and then the surveillance. And there's a new book out by Chris Coyne, who teaches economics at George Mason. You know Chris, and co-authored with Abigail Hall, who's also an economics professor, I think, maybe political science. But they've done a book, and the title escapes me right now, but anybody that would like to look it up, look up Chris Coyne, Coyne. And their thesis is that this mindset of interventionism overseas is inevitably imported domestically, that it just doesn't stay over there. So we end up with that same mindset. Oh, well, we need a surveillance mechanism here. We need assassinations over the power to assassinate over here. And so the notion that interventionism over there doesn't affect the United States or the American people is fallacious. They've written an entire book saying this is what's happening with America, that they are importing their mindset of central planning and surveillance and all the rest of the stuff that they establish in overseas lands right here in the United States, all with the idea of keeping us safe from the dangers that they're producing with their interventionism overseas.
You know, back in the 50s and especially the 60s, people would write books about the imperial presidency, arbitrary executive authority. But is it not the height of the imperial presidency and an unrestrained executive authority? When, as was reported many times in the media about during the Obama administration, that Obama would himself decide who the drones would strike. In other words, he personally would okay and approve and direct, drone this person, drone that person. Where the head of the government is himself determining life and death. Now, I'm not saying that Obama was Joseph Stalin, but it has an element of a parallel where the opened archives after the fall of the Soviet Union, the partial open archives, would show the documents where there would be the lists of people who were to be executed, purged, and what was scrawled over the approving legal document, the signature of Stalin himself. He himself was signing off, kill X, Y, and Z, either individually or in groups of hundreds, thousands sometimes. Is that not, at least in a sense, a parallel mindset? Okay, when Obama, as the press reported, would himself say, I will decide when the drone strikes, who will be targeted, will it be done now? Are there too many innocent people around it, or does it really not matter because this target is too important, we have to take the risk? Is that not life and death? The same way Stalin was signing off on the executions of individuals, hundreds, or sometimes lists of thousands of people? It's the same mindset of unrestrained, unrestricted rule of men rather than rule of law under a strictly defined and enumerated and limited constitution. This is part of the dangerous path that we've gone down, Jacob. It's never too late. Nothing is inevitable. But if you want to stop a worse situation from evolving, developing by following the path you're on, you have to rethink how you got on that path and backtrack to a sounder basis and a better society.
Absolutely. And like you say, nothing's inevitable. I mean, we know that because America was once on a path that involved none of those things. And somehow or another, the imperialists and the assassins and the central planners, they were able to shift the direction of the United States. But nothing's inevitable. Ideas matter. They have consequences. They have power. And especially sound ideas on liberty and limited government. And that's, of course, what we're doing. And that can all of a sudden grab people's hearts and minds, that idea. It can sweep across society where no government, no matter how powerful, can withstand the change. I mean, look at the Chinese totalitarian regime. They have total power. And yet they're still concerned about conferences and seminars that talk about the ideas that you and I are discussing. That's because they're smart. They understand that ideas on liberty have a power that sometimes can end up overthrowing totalitarian regimes with total power. So, Richard, I greatly enjoyed the show, and I've greatly enjoyed the conference. Hope to do it with you again, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Until next time, thanks to the viewers and listeners for joining us once again.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. To get more, come to our website, fff.org. Subscribe to our free daily publication that we put a lot of time into preparing, which includes a weekly article by Richard, our FFF Daily. Subscribe to our monthly journal, Future of Freedom. And subscribe to our YouTube channel and get this show, Libertarian Angle, on a weekly basis. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see y'all next week.